So a long time ago, when I was first in college, that's when I first got depressed. So my age is 30 now, and 10 years back is when I first got depressed. So it took me 10 years to properly heal myself and recover fully. Now, hopefully, if you are depressed, maybe this video will help you to heal yourself quicker, because I have picked up lots and lots of tricks along the way. So depression is curable. I used to not think so. But at the same time, depression is like a marathon. It's not a sprint. You can't solve your depression by watching a YouTube video like this overnight. So the first step to solving depression is understanding that for a long time in the near future, you're going to feel sad and bad, and there's no escape from it. It's very important you understand that. Because when I was depressed, every time I expected to feel happy and expected to feel better, that's when my depression got even worse. For example, in this Joker scene, by forcing himself to become happy, he just makes himself more sad. So when you're first depressed, you don't realize this. In the beginning, you try your hardest, your 150% in order to make yourself happy, and sometimes you even force yourself to become happy. But the sad thing is, our emotions are not under our control. This is what James Hollis calls the autonomous psyche. By psyche, he refers to our soul, and by autonomous, he basically means it's not under our control, which is completely true. I have experienced it firsthand. In normal situations and in normal scenarios, when everyone around me are feeling normal, I alone used to feel sad. Why? For absolutely no reason. I just used to be sad. And if somebody asked me to explain myself, like why I'm sad, that used to make me feel more sad because I couldn't explain why. So, depression is this illogical thing where you can't will yourself to become happy and you can't logically convince yourself to become happy. You are at your heart's and soul's mercy. If your soul decides you are not happy, then you are not happy. And it's this realization that makes depression feel even more sad. Because if your own mind is not under your control, then what control do you think you're going to have over life? So you find that your confidence is gradually starting to fade in general with everything in life. So you hang out with people, you don't vibe, connect, or relate with anyone, because while they are able to genuinely be happy in a given moment, you're only there acting like you're happy by wearing a mask so that you can fit in. So even in a huge group of people, you alone will feel alone. So you'll feel alone in a crowd. So it's just like that Mike and a lyric. While everyone's in a color movie, you alone are in a black and white film. And while everyone's all happy and cheerful, you alone are like a zombie, where you walk, talk, and do everything like others. But inside, underneath it all, you're feeling dead inside. But why depression? I mean, depression doesn't come all of a sudden out of the blue, right? There should be some kind of a trigger. So my trigger was something very silly. In fact, if I think about it now, I feel really embarrassed. So in news, you would have often heard the story where a girl fails 10th exam and she jumps out of a building and commits suicide. Well, exact same story, but I just didn't commit suicide. So back in my school days, every professor in my school was like expecting great results from me. They were all like, Vignesh, you're a genius. You're going to ace every exam and every test in every universe. And I went and failed in every entrance exam possible in this universe. So after my 12th standard, it was very difficult for me to get into college. In fact, I got into NIT Trichy only because I had the quota advantage of being in backward class. So when people were expecting great results from me, I gave them grand failure in return. And this was so surprising and so shocking, not only to my professors, but also to me. Because even I was thinking I'm smart. But turns out I'm just really, really dumb. I mean, 1 or 2 exams, fine. But all the exams, unanimously, if I fail, then that actually proves a pattern that I'm not as smart as I thought I was, right? So whenever your expectation is so high and the reality is so low, and when you fall from that expectation, you fall into depression. So you would have seen all these expectation versus reality memes, right? Only thing is, when that fall happens for another person, it's comedy. But when it happens to ourselves, it's tragedy. So when I fell down to reality, my ego bubble burst and I fell headfirst into depression. And whenever the expectation versus reality gap is too high, the depression is too strong. So this can happen at any point in time in your life. So say you're at your job and you think you're going to get promoted with flying colors, but then if you get fired, then you will fall into depression. That's what happened to Cafe Coffee Day owner, right? He thought he was a billionaire, but then his business was going bankrupt. Similarly, let's say you're married and you think your wife is going to surprise you with a beautiful baby, but then you find out your wife has cheated on you. Then you straight away fall into depression. So it's just like that Vivek comedy in Tamil. How great I used to be, but how lame I am now. That fall from pride to shame just causes depression. And when that tragedy of falling is too hard to digest, then people usually start contemplating about suicide. And I have contemplated suicide because suicide is a neat trick. By stopping life, you can stop the pain in life. So back in college, I used to self-shame and self-hate myself so much that one day I just told myself that you are so worthless that this world would be a better place if you would just simply die. And when I realized I meant the words I'm saying to myself, I just broke down that night and cried myself to sleep. But since the conviction in my voice was so strong, I started feeling scared. Because what if some random day, in some wave of heated emotion, what if I decide to end my life? So that just really scared me. And what I did was, in order to survive, I just switched off my brain and stopped listening to my heart. So between me and my soul, I just made a cut. Just all systems shut down. And this only made the problem even worse because now I stopped listening to my own instincts, my own thoughts. I just kept ignoring my own emotions and stopped paying attention to my own mind voice. And according to James Hollis, being in sync with your soul, being aligned with your heart is the only way to find happiness in life. But I did exactly the opposite and started escaping my own mind and my own thoughts. And hence started my struggle with depression. So I got all the depression symptoms. So when people go into severe depression, they usually find it hard to even get out of their bed in the morning. But mine wasn't that severe. But I used to all the time feel drowsy and sleepy. Even when I have a whole night of sleep, next day morning I wake up feeling sleepy. And anyways, life wasn't fun when I was awake. So I preferred sleeping. So sleep college. This was my routine. And in between, if the depression gets too severe, then I take bus rides. Basically, I just walk up to a random bus stop, catch a random bus, buy the last ticket to the last stop, and travel for 1 hour or something to the neighboring city. Then I get down, again catch another bus, and return back to college for nighttime dinner. So Haberman calls this the optic flow. Basically, as you are riding a bus, there are things that are passing on both sides of your peripheral vision, right? That is proved to be very relaxing and calming for the mind. So which is why when you go out for a walk, you get this optic flow and you start to calm down and relax. But I also started struggling from other depression symptoms like foggy memory and poor learning capacity. So basically, when you're depressed, it's very difficult for you to focus, learn, and understand things. So naturally, my grades started dropping, and I was all the time in this brain fog. They call this the freeze mental state. So anything you tell me takes me 10 minutes to understand. I was just very slow to understand things. I became more dumb. So naturally, since I was in college, I started getting bullied for my intelligence. So my own friends started calling me Pita Magan. So basically, it was a character who was a retard in the movie who found it hard to understand basic normal social cues. Even 2 days back, I got a comment saying, "Who's this retard?" It was written in Tamil. So my entire depression, my entire pride to shame fall was all about this deep insecurity that I am not smart, I am dumb. So when people call me Pita Magan or when I get YouTube comments like these, it really hits too close to the bone. So the very pain that I'm trying to run away from, the very reality that I'm scared of, these guys are declaring it to be true by calling me dumb and laughing at me. So back in college, my depression only kept growing stronger and stronger day by day. So slowly I moved on from the freeze mental state to the fawn mental state. So I became a people pleaser who was just licking my friend's ass to stop getting bullied. So I was like lying, pretending, acting and agreeing to everything that this idiot would say. because I was more idiotic than him. So I soon started realizing that depression is this toxic loop. The more I was escaping from my pain, the more stronger and stronger my pain grew. So it was like that Wizard of Earthsea novel. So there, the main hero, lead, is basically running away from his shadow. He's all the time trying to escape and hide from that shadow. And the farther and farther he runs away from the shadow, the stronger and stronger that shadow grew. So at one point in time, he just stops and faces the shadow because he understands that that is the only way to conquer the shadow. So maybe if I was a girl, then I would have faced my pain, cried myself a river, and recovered from my depression very quickly in a very healthy manner. But because I was a boy and boys are meant to be tough, I kept suppressing down my feelings and kept bottling them up. And I just never ever cried. I just cried that one time that I wanted to commit suicide. Otherwise, I'm just constipated with crying. I mean, TV shows, movies, for all these things, I can just cry for hours and hours and hours. But when it comes to my own life's sadness and my own life's depression, I couldn't even cry a single drop of tear. So, unable to cry, boys my age, usually when they get depressed, they go towards alcohol. They basically drown their sorrow with booze. But I never touched alcohol because I knew that if I touch alcohol, I will lose control. And if I lose control, I was afraid I would just commit suicide. Because day in and day out, every time when my professors are teaching something in college, I used to all the time daydream about jumping out of our third floor lecture hall. Just the same daydream constantly looping in my brain. So I know if I take alcohol, then my subconscious brain will actually kick in and I might even jump off a building just curious as to how it actually feels. I mean, I do keep daydreaming about it all the time, right? So whenever my friends offer me booze or invite me to drink, I'm like all the time, no, 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 no. And they think I'm like super disciplined. But it's all just survival mechanism. So if not cigarettes and if not alcohol and if not drugs, then how does one escape from pain? Well, I chose cinema, movies, TV shows, novels. I just kept binge watching TV shows like anything. Grey's Anatomy, 15 seasons. House MD, 10 seasons. Breaking Bad, 5 seasons. Every show possible. And the thing is, I don't even like those shows. Like House MD, for example. I am a computer science student and I never ever understood any of the medicine that was being discussed in that show. But I just needed something to be playing all the time so that I am distracted from my own life and my own pain. And the strange thing is, I'm always drawn to sad TV shows and sad music and sad stuff. Basically, I realized I'm developing an addiction to my own sadness. I heard this for the first time in the song Somebody That I Used to Know. You could get addicted to a certain type of sadness. And even in sad song, the same lyrics. Sing me a sad song and make me feel better, but sing me a happy song and I might start to cry. So as I was searching for sad content online, that's when I stumbled onto Game of Thrones. Basically the book that changed my life forever. But I didn't know it back then. Back then I picked up the book because it was one depressing novel. So basically in this story, every character's life gets worse, 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 and nothing ever gets better. So the concept of the book is they give you this hope that things are looking up and things are going to get better, but then they crush it and they do that in a loop. So basically they give hope and crush it, hope and crush it. So if you're feeling depressed, then Game of Thrones is the absolute best companion for you because it feels like a hot tea and a warm blanket. It's so comforting. And especially if you're constipated at crying, then you must try Game of Thrones. But there is this one character in that book called Arya Stark, about whom I want to talk about in this video. Because there is a dialogue that she says in the 5th book that completely changed my perspective on depression. So if you don't want the novels to be spoiled, then you can just stop watching this video. But if you don't mind one character and the two one specific portion of her life being spoiled in return for a greater understanding of depression, then please continue watching the video. It's really revolutionary. So Arya Stark is this girl who loses everything in her life. Basically, she will lose her father, mother, brothers, sisters. She used to be a princess in a castle, but over the course of the books, she will be brought down to the level of a beggar on the streets. Expectation, reality. But instead of falling into depression, the one thing that keeps her going is revenge. Basically, she would want to kill the king because the king will kill her father. But the king is in a fortress guarded by his army while she's on the streets begging people for food. So her dream will only give you so much depression if you are not already depressed. But Arya doesn't give up. So she'll be like, let's try to learn fighting. Let's take it step by step. So because she's a girl, nobody would have taught her fighting. So she would go to this magical temple and she would start begging the monk to teach her fighting. But the monk will be like, no, 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 no. But she'll keep on pestering him every day, begging, begging, pestering, pestering, begging, begging, pestering, pestering. So the monk will get irritated one day. So one day the monk will give her a glass of milk and he'll be like, this is a super magical milk and it will make you super strong. So Arya will get so excited and she'll drink all of the milk. But the next day when she wakes up, she'll be blind. So she'll go to the monk and be like, why? The monk will say, I'll give you your eyes back, but promise me you'll get out of this temple. Now, what would anyone do at this point? Everyone would be taking their eyes back and running the hell out of the temple, right? But you know what Arya says? She'll say, I can give up whatever I want. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying right here in this temple and you can have my eyes. So for the next 2-3 months, Arya, who was just a beggar at the temple, will now be a blind beggar at the same temple. So basically what Arya is doing is she's teaching us pain tolerance. So whenever we face pain, all of our reaction would be to run away from it. Nobody runs towards pain. So we are all just like the Wizard of Earthsea hero. Depression is this weird kind of pain that when you run away from it, it grows stronger and stronger. And the only way to conquer the pain is to turn back and run towards it. So Arya Stark could have run from the temple, taking her eyes back. That would have been less pain. But she instead chose to stay at the temple and let him have her eyes. Basically, she stayed right there with the pain and tolerated the pain. And the line, I can give up whatever I want, means not only the pain of losing her eyes, Arya is willing to bear and tolerate the pain of losing anything. I mean, if it comes to it, she's even willing to give up her own life in order to take that revenge. So, everybody I knew in my life, all my friends and all, every single person I've talked to, they all think running away from the pain and running towards happiness is the smarter thing to do. But for the very first time in Game of Thrones, by reading Arya Stark's line, I was seeing a person who was willing to face pain and run towards pain. So the readiness and the willpower that Arya Stark shows inspired me to stop running away from my pain. So instead of watching TV shows and distracting myself, or taking bus rides and escaping my life, or pleasing people to save myself some pain, I decided I'm going to stop the TV shows, stop the bus rides, and stand my ground when it comes to my friends. So I started speaking the truth, whatever was in my mind, no matter how much I would get ridiculed and bullied for it. In fact, a huge fight broke out between me and my friends, and we all separated. I became all alone. So from a depressing life, I went to an even more depressing life. Because at least I had some 4 or 5 friends to keep distracting myself from the pain, and it was all good. But now I had to face my pain. I was all alone, and I was with myself, my bad company, all the time. So the point is, it gets worse before it gets better. They call it the J curve. And every time it gets worse and worse, I just keep telling myself, I can give up whatever I want. Meaning not only this pain, I can tolerate pain even worse than this. And I keep on going. So from fawn stage, I had moved to free stage. And from free stage, I moved on to flight and fight stage. So basically, I stopped expecting happiness and stopped chasing after happiness. And instead accepted pain and sadness as my new way of life now. So I stopped praying, hoping, and begging the universe to give me happiness, and instead accepted pain and sadness as my life. Yes, I am going to be sad. This is my life now. Because emotions are not under our control. The only thing that's under our control is action. And I decided I'm going to act no matter how bad I feel, and I'm going to act no matter how worse I feel. So instead of running away from the pain, I tolerated the pain and even took action that would increase the pain. I started running towards it. So I used to wake up in the morning and go for running. A person who even after 10 hours of sleep used to feel sleepy was waking up at 6 and going for running. Isn't that a more painful life than just to rest when you're feeling bad? Yes, but you know what? I can give up whatever I want. I stopped all kinds of junk food, all kinds of sweets, chocolates, everything tasty, and ate nutritious food. Isn't that more pain than whatever I'm feeling right now? Yes, but I can give up whatever I want. So I started studying and concentrating in class even though I couldn't. So my head would literally hurt and I would still choose the action of picking up the book and reading the next line, the next word, just tolerating the bad pain. So normal people, they start studying only when they feel better or get into the mood. But as a depressed person, I know that my mood is never going to get better. And if I wait, I'm going to wait 100 years. The exams will pass me and go. Life will just keep moving on. That's also a Mike Emanuel lyric, where he feels like his tire is punctured, but the world is moving on. So I started studying even on a bad day and even under bad weather. I just pushed, and kept studying. So every day I would wake up in the morning in pain due to my depression. But during the course of the day, I would take these forceful actions that would just put me in even more pain. Why? I can give up whatever I want. Meaning I can take not just this pain, I can take pain more horrible than this. So I can give up whatever I want became this mantra that I kept on repeating to myself whenever I felt like giving up. I just become mindful of my pain and I just say to myself that yes, I can tolerate this pain. So I became a yes man to pain, basically. I said yes. Pain, 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 yes, yes, yes. So choosing all this pain didn't change my life overnight. In fact, all my friends start studying for the exams just one day before the exam and they score 8 pointers in the exams. But me, I start 1 month before the exams. I take huge textbooks and I read line after line, chapter after chapter, 300, 400 pages I read. And still, I barely manage to get a 7 pointer. This is because my cognitive power, intelligence, memorizing capability, learning capacity, everything is tied to the depression. So when I'm depressed, I would be weak in all those skills. So I had to put 10 times more hard work than my friends and get 10 times less results than my friends, which will cause another kind of depression. Like, why me? Why so much pain in my life? Everyone's life is way easier than mine. Only mine is harder. But I just tell to myself, I can give up whatever I want. And I just accepted that life and kept fighting. I accepted a life where things are unfair and I have to put 10 times more effort and get 10 times less results than everybody else. But I was like, this is the life I have got and I have to live it, right? So during this pain tolerating journey of mine, I found two other inspirations. One is Heath Ledger and other is Will Smith. So Will Smith in an interview said that if he and his friend got on a treadmill and if the game was who stays the longest wins, then either he dies or his friend gets off the treadmill. Basically, pain tolerance. Basically, Will Smith willingly will choose to endure pain. Similarly, Heath Ledger, in order to prepare for his Joker role, he locked himself up in an empty room filled with Joker books for 1 month. And for 1 month, he kept reading Joker book after Joker book and had no social contact whatsoever. He was just simply cut off from the entire outside world. Pain tolerance. So people everywhere need to stop and choose running towards the pain in order to grow. So I decided to do the same thing. Just before placements, I locked myself up, stopped talking to all my friends, stopped WhatsApp, social media, TV shows, movies, cinema, stopped everything, cut myself off from the outside world and just kept studying for 2 whole months. 2 months later, I became college topper. So I got placed in Walmart and got the highest package in my college, in my department at that time. So this flight part of my depression was very useful because I was working and because I was working, I kept growing. But still the underlying depression was never getting addressed. For example, working was the only way I could function. So even after getting placed in Walmart, I used to work every day, even on Sundays. I just used to pick some random project because I need to keep working. Because if I stop working, I fall into depression. So work was kind of an escapism of its own. So that's why it's called the flight mode. They're constantly running. So I was like this Munich hero. While I'm running, I'm happy. But if I'm still, I can't tolerate it. And this fight part of my depression was also not that useful either. I used to be antisocial and I used to get very angry for very small things. So I was quick to anger and I used to explode for tiny things, which is why my marriage fell apart and I got divorced. So 4 years after Walmart, I got married, but my toxicity ended my marriage. So divorce and its subsequent heartbreak threw me into a new level of depression. But I just kept fighting through it because like Arya says, I can give whatever I want. So I thought I'll just gave up my wife too. But this time it was different because this time the loneliness I felt was really strong. So if you're alone, then you don't really notice the difference. But if you're with a partner, then suddenly if you're alone, then you notice the difference. That loneliness hits you really hard. So I searched online to deal with loneliness and I found the best tool called journaling. What's journaling? Well, journaling is nothing but talking to yourself, but by writing. So basically, you take a diary and just write the day that you just experienced. So you review the day, analyze the day, and then just self reflect with yourself about the day. And this helped incredibly with my depression because I was not feeling lonely anymore. You see, people think loneliness is caused by lack of connection with other people. So people often advise go meet strangers and go say hi. Keep trying to connect with random strangers and maybe you'll find your friends, your gang, your tribe. But the truth is, loneliness is due to lack of connection with yourself. So just like James Wallace said, being in sync and being aligned with your soul is the only way to be happy. So me switching off my brain and soul in order to save myself from suicide was actually the wrong thing to do. And journaling started the healing process and the process of reconciling me with myself. So loneliness problem was addressed, but I was still feeling this mild form of depression humming away in the background. And parallelly, I was installing dating apps to try to find love again. And I was getting zero matches while I was expecting so many. So expectation is I'm good with girls. Reality is I suck at girls. Depression. So I started searching for self-improvement advices and I found two advices that changed my life forever. Not by finding me matches, no, that is still zero. Which is why I randomly approach a girl who I see on the street, like in this video. So the two important advices that I found was related to my depression. And one was dopamine addiction and number two was meditation. Let's start with dopamine addiction first. So dopamine is this chemical that gives you energy to do things. So when the brain absorbs dopamine, you have a lot of energy to do things. You feel more alive. But when the brain stops absorbing dopamine, then you feel depressed, you have low energy, and you don't feel like doing anything. So absorption of dopamine determines how interested or motivated you are in life. It determines your drive. Now each activity releases different amounts of dopamine. So let's take the small pleasures first that produce small amounts of dopamine. Like sitting in a park and enjoying the sounds of the birds. That is a small pleasure. Gives little bit of dopamine. But let's say in the same park, a hot, attractive girl walks past you. Now you immediately feel excited. So that means a huge amount of dopamine was released by her. So if you classify every activity as low amounts of dopamine and high amounts of dopamine, you will find that all the super exciting and super pleasurable, super seducing things in life give high amounts of dopamine. For example, junk food, the tasty chocolate sweet, that gives lots of excitement. High amount of dopamine. Porn, sex, high amount of dopamine. The girl in the park, same thing. And then social media scrolling or watching movies, binge watching TV shows, talking to friends, all these social things give you a lot of excitement, high amounts of dopamine. And then gambling, video games, they are very addictive. You get lots and lots of energy by playing them, high amounts of dopamine. And finally, drugs like alcohol, cigarette, all the drugs give you high amounts of dopamine. And the problem with high dopamine sources is when the brain is constantly bombarded with high amounts of dopamine all day long, then the brain has to be in high energy all day, which is very tiring and it's also very dangerous to you. So what the brain does is it reduces the dopamine sensitivity of the dopamine receptors. So even though a high amount of dopamine you're getting, only small amount of dopamine is being absorbed by the receptors. So if this dopamine sensitivity is reduced, then all the simple pleasures in life are not pleasurable anymore. So sitting in a corner, reading a good book, drinking warm tea, these things won't sound fun anymore. They'll sound boring. You won't have the patience for it. If you are in a cafe, you'll be all the time fidgeting. You'll be impatient, frustrated. You just want to keep playing your video games because they are so exciting that normal life is so boring for you. So when you're used to the high life, being high all the time, having pleasure all the time, then coming back to normal life, the baseline, it gets very hard. So in a graph, this is how simple pleasures look like. So if you take this as dopamine and this as time, then if you are working, learning or trying to understand something, and if something clicks, then you get a small bump of dopamine like this. But then you're not going to get idea after idea after idea, right? So it's going to take some time before the next idea comes. So after some time, you'll get another small bump. So each spike of dopamine is small in size and well spaced out. But if you sip a glass of wine, then immediately you get a huge spike of dopamine, all from this simple action of the hand. Like, that's all. Like when you're studying, you're technically solving a problem, thinking hard, concentrating, you're putting a lot of effort to get such a small spike of dopamine. But when you're sipping wine with zero effort, you get a huge amount of dopamine spike. Less effort, more reward, right? So what you're going to do is just going to take a sip after sip after sip to keep feeling good. So you're going to get spikes, spikes, spikes. So each spike is huge in magnitude and it comes in a short amount of time. So in order to handle this, what the brain does is it reduces your dopamine sensitivity. Basically, the dopamine receptors, they become inefficient, they become poor at absorbing dopamine. So even this huge amount of dopamine spike is not going to make you feel good. So the first sip of wine gave you a high, but the next sips of wines stop giving you the same amount of high. So what do? You take 2 sips of wine or you go for a more stronger alcohol. So now you're taking huge spikes. 2 sips of wine or more stronger alcohol and you again keep maxing it out. So now your brain again, in order to protect yourself, is going to decrease the dopamine sensitivity even further. So now you're not getting a high even in like 30% alcohol or 40% alcohol. But at the same time, what's happening is you are now dopamine desensitized, meaning even huge spikes of dopamine, you're actually numb to it. So when you're numb to even huge spikes of dopamine, then what's going to happen when you're sitting at the park and just hearing the birds chirp? That's like a very small dopamine and you're not even going to feel a thing from it. So the simple pleasures from everyday life simply vanish and you cannot be happy in life without sipping alcohol. So you grow addicted to it. Like you cannot sustain life without being hooked on to alcohol. And even with alcohol, you're just going for stronger and stronger alcohol, but getting less and less high. And everything in life is losing its meaning for you. This is called progressive narrowing of the things that give you pleasure. Meaning you used to enjoy tennis or you used to enjoy football with your friends or talking with your girlfriend, but all those things have stopped giving you happiness in life and you are just depressed. And this is exactly what happened in porn addiction for me. So when you normally go on a date with a girl, you're going to try to court her, and the main attraction source for a girl is connection. So basically, you need to connect with her. That's how girls' attraction system works. But connecting is just like studying. You're not going to find a connection or an idea every single second in a conversation with her. It's going to take time, and the small spike of dopamine that you get from a connection, that's going to be well spaced out. But if you're in the habit of watching porn and masturbating, then you get a huge spike of dopamine when you ejaculate, all from the stroke of your hand. So very less effort, lot of reward, and as you do this for a long period of time, your brain is going to get desensitized. It's going to lower its sensitivity to dopamine. So what happens now? On a date with a girl, all the courting and finding connections with a girl, this is also boring to you. You don't have the patience for all that. You are very, very needy to have sex with her immediately. And this neediness is going to show and it's going to definitely make you less attractive. Because you're not giving the connection the girl wants, and the girl understands that you are behind her only for her body and not for her mind. And girls really hate that. And the same thing happens when you eat junk food. You lose tolerance for nutritious food. And this reflects even in your work, where small pleasures, small rewards, small 1% improvements, these things don't give you pleasure anymore, and you're all the time just frustrated with work because you're not getting that huge promotions, that 2-level rises. You need immediate gratification. You can't play the long game anymore. You can't be patient and put efforts. And there's a Will Smith story where he builds a huge building and he says every day he just lays one brick perfectly and keeps doing that again and again and finds pleasure in putting one brick perfectly at that place. These kinds of small pleasures you won't be able to enjoy. So in order to restore your brain and get the dopamine sensitivity again to normal levels, you need to quit all sources of high dopamine giving activities like junk food, porn, video games, gambling, alcohol and cigarettes. And you need to take up meditation. Because in meditation, you're going to sit there alone by yourself for half an hour and you're going to keep paying attention to your breath. You know how boring focusing on your breath is? Just nothing happens. Just the breath. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. You just can't even sit for 5 minutes in the beginning. Seriously, I couldn't sit even 5 minutes in meditation when I first started meditation. But it's just like gym. You can't lift 150 kg on the first day, right? You start small, 5 kg, right? So similarly, I started small with 5 minutes of meditation each day and quitting all the dopamine addictions, which was really, really, really hard because I was so addicted to porn. Staying away from porn required an immense amount of willpower from me. Basically, just like this Varnamayiram scene where Surya cries when he tries to quit drugs, I've literally cried a tear in trying to quit porn and masturbation. I'm not lying. It was the hardest thing that I ever had to do. So if you quit all of the dopamine addictions and if you take up meditation every single day, then you're going to bring back your dopamine sensitivity to normal levels and you're going to find pleasure in everyday life, in normal mundane activities again. And not just increasing your dopamine sensitivity, even your emotions can be reduced using meditation. For example, if someone is angry, what do you tell them? Take deep breaths, calm down. Similarly, when somebody is afraid, scared, panicking, what do you tell them? Take deep breaths, calm down. So basically, any kind of intense emotion that you feel can be reduced using your breath. So there's this weird cyclic dependency between the brain and the lungs. So basically, brain does everything that it does in order to keep the lungs breathing. That is life. If you stop the breath, there is no life, right? So all the intelligence, everything that the brain does is to keep the lungs breathing. But the lungs, through its breath, can control the brain's emotions. And learning to tame your mind, tame your emotions, and control your mind using your breath is the art of meditation. So meditation not just allows you to feel pleasure again in life, but it also helps you to tame down the untamable, uncontrollable emotions that you have. So the four strategies for curing depression is to journal and connect with your soul. Take action like Arya Stark that will give you more pain. Don't run away from pain. Act even when you feel bad. Number 3, quit all dopamine addictions. They're frying up your brain and they're making you more depressed in the long run. And number 4, take up meditation to down-regulate your emotions and up-regulate your dopamine sensitivity. I'll see you in the next video.